Giving birth was supposed to be the happiest moment of my life. After 9 long months, my baby was finally in my arms. A beautiful tiny boy with soft skin and a gentle cry. I named him Noah. The hospital smelled of disinfectant and flowers, a mix of cleanliness and joy. My husband Ethan was by my side, his eyes filled with love and pride. The nurses smiled as they checked on me, making sure I was comfortable. Everything seemed perfect. But that night, something changed. I was exhausted but couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard something. Whispers, soft and distant, coming from the dark corners of the hospital room. At first, I thought it was just the nurses outside. But as I listened carefully, I realized the voices were inside the room. I turned to look at Ethan. He was snoring lightly in the chair beside me. Noah was asleep in his crib, wrapped in a tiny blue blanket. Then I heard it again. A soft whisper, not from outside, not from the hallway. It was coming from Noah's crib. My heart pounded. I sat up, ignoring the pain in my body. Slowly, I leaned over the crib and looked inside. Noah was asleep, peaceful, but something was wrong. His breathing was too slow, his tiny chest rising and falling unnaturally. I reached out to touch him, but the moment my fingers brushed his skin, the whispers stopped. His breathing returned to normal. I told myself it was exhaustion, that I was just imagining things, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. The next day, a nurse came into my room. She was different from the others. Her uniform was old-fashioned, almost like something from the past. Her face was pale, her eyes too dark. She smiled at me, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was empty. "How are you feeling?" she asked in a soft voice. "Tired," I admitted, looking at Noah, who was awake now, staring at the ceiling. She walked closer, looking into the crib. "He's beautiful," she whispered. "Perfect." Something about the way she said it sent chills down my spine. She reached down, brushing a cold finger across Noah's cheek. I wanted to pull him away, but my body felt heavy, frozen. Then she turned to me and said, "You should rest. I'll take care of him." The way she said it, it didn't feel right. "No," I said, forcing my voice to be firm. "I'll take care of him myself." Her smile faded. For a second, her face seemed to shift, her features stretching unnaturally. Then, just like that, she was gone. I never saw her leave. The door never opened. She just disappeared. That night, I was alone with Noah. Ethan had gone home to rest. The hospital was quiet, the hallways dark. I tried to sleep, but a strange feeling crept over me. Something wasn't right. I turned my head to check on Noah, and my heart stopped. His eyes were open, wide, too wide. They weren't his eyes anymore. They were black, deep, endless black. His tiny lips curled into a grin, an unnatural, twisted smile that no newborn should be able to make. I gasped, sitting up, my body screaming in pain. "Noah?" My voice trembled. He blinked. For a moment, everything seemed normal again. His eyes were back to their soft baby blue. His tiny fingers curled around the edge of the blanket. Had I imagined it? The whispers started again. This time, they were louder, closer. I looked around the room, my heart pounding against my ribs. Shadows flickered in the corners, stretching and twisting unnaturally. Then I saw her, the nurse. She was standing in the corner of the room, half hidden in the darkness, her body barely visible. Her smile was too wide now, her eyes gleaming with something sinister. I reached for the emergency button, my fingers trembling, but before I could press it, the lights flickered. The room turned ice cold. The nurse stepped forward, her voice soft like a lullaby. "He's not yours anymore." Terror gripped me. I lunged forward, grabbing Noah from the crib. His tiny body felt so light, too light, like he wasn't real anymore. The nurse took another step, her arms stretched unnaturally long, reaching for him. "No!" I screamed, clutching him to my chest. She hissed, her face twisting in anger. The walls around me shook, the whispers turning into shrieks. Then suddenly, the door burst open. A real nurse, A normal one rushed in. The lights flickered back to normal. The whispers stopped. The shadow nurse was gone. But Noah wasn't crying. He wasn't moving. Tears filled my eyes. "Help him," I begged. The nurse grabbed him, checking his breathing. For a terrible moment, I thought I had lost him. Then, a soft cry. A real, normal cry. Relief flooded me as the nurse handed him back. "He's fine," she assured me. "You must have had a nightmare." But I knew the truth. It wasn't a nightmare. Something had tried to take my baby. I left the hospital the next morning. As I walked out, holding Noah close, I felt eyes watching me. I turned, and there she was, the shadow nurse, standing at the end of the hallway, her empty, hollow eyes locked onto mine. Her lips moved, a whisper, just for me, "This isn't over." Then she vanished. I clutched Noah tighter, my heart racing. I didn't know what she was, a ghost, a demon. All I knew was one thing: she wanted my baby, and I would do anything to protect him. Bringing Noah home was supposed to be the start of a peaceful life. No more cold hospital rooms, no more beeping machines, just the warmth of our house, the comfort of our own space. Ethan carried the baby carrier inside while I slowly stepped in, my body still weak from the delivery. The house smelled familiar, a mix of lavender and fresh laundry. But as I stood there, something felt wrong. The air was heavy, like we weren't alone. I shook off the feeling. It was just exhaustion. That's what I kept telling myself. But deep down, I knew better. That night, we settled into our routine. Ethan cooked dinner while I rocked Noah in my arms, humming a soft lullaby. He seemed peaceful, his tiny fingers gripping mine as he dozed off. For the first time since the hospital, I felt safe. Until the baby monitor crackled. It started as static, soft, distant, harmless. Then, a whisper. My blood turned cold. I grabbed the monitor and held it close, listening. It wasn't Ethan's voice. It wasn't mine. It was her, the shadow nurse. "He's not yours," the voice whispered, barely audible but clear enough to send a chill down my spine. I ran to the nursery, my heart pounding. Noah was still asleep in his crib, his tiny chest rising and falling. Everything looked normal, but I wasn't alone. A figure stood in the corner, tall, dark, motionless. She didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there, watching. I gasped and flipped on the light. Gone. The room was empty, but the whispers remained. I grabbed Noah and ran to the living room where Ethan was setting the table. He saw my face and frowned. "What's wrong?" I told him everything. The nurse at the hospital, the whispers, the baby monitor. He sighed, rubbing his face. "Babe, you're exhausted. You need rest." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But I knew the truth. Something had followed us home. Over the next few days, strange things kept happening. Noah would wake up at odd hours, staring at the ceiling, eyes wide as if watching something I couldn't see. Toys moved on their own. The baby monitor kept picking up static, sometimes whispers, sometimes laughter. And then, the worst part. One night, I woke up to find Noah's crib empty. I screamed, bolting upright, shaking Ethan awake. Noah's gone. We tore through the house, checking every room, every corner. Then, a sound from the nursery. We ran inside, and there he was, lying in his crib, smiling. But his eyes, they were black again. Deep, hollow, wrong. And then he spoke, a single word in a voice that was not his. "Mommy," Ethan gasped. "Did he just?" Noah was only a few days old. There was no way he could talk. I grabbed him, clutching him to my chest. His body was ice cold. The whispers returned, swirling around us. Then, the door slammed shut. Ethan grabbed the door handle and yanked. It wouldn't budge. The lights flickered, shadows twisting across the walls. Then the crib moved, lifted, floated. The air grew thick, pressing down on us. And then she appeared, the shadow nurse, standing by the crib, her long, bony fingers reaching for Noah. "You should have left him," she hissed. "He belongs with us now." "No," I screamed, backing away. "You can't have him." The walls shook, the windows rattled. A horrible screech filled the air, like nails on glass. I gripped Noah tightly, my heart racing. Ethan grabbed my hand. "We have to go." We ran, pushing through the heavy air, forcing the door open. As we stepped into the hallway, the lights exploded behind us. Glass rained down. A final deafening scream filled the house. Then, silence. The next morning, we packed our bags and left. We didn't tell anyone what happened. Who would believe us? But as we drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror, and there she was, standing in the upstairs window, watching, waiting. I clutched Noah tighter. This wasn't over. Not yet. We didn't look back. Ethan drove in silence, gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. I held Noah close, listening to the soft rhythm of his breathing. He was warm again, normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something still wasn't right. We didn't have a plan. We just needed to get away. But deep down, I knew running wouldn't solve this. She would find us. We stopped at a small roadside motel a few hours away, too exhausted to keep driving. The room smelled of stale air and old carpet, but it didn't matter. We locked the doors, pulled the curtains shut, and collapsed onto the bed, Noah nestled between us. For the first time in days, I almost felt safe. Until I woke up. The air was thick, stagnant. A chill ran through me. Something was in the room. I turned my head slowly and froze. The closet door was open. A shadow moved inside. Then, the whisper, soft, gentle. "You can't run," I gasped, sitting up, clutching Noah. My eyes darted around the room. The door was still locked, the windows still shut. Ethan groaned beside me. "What's wrong?" I pointed at the closet, my hand trembling. It was empty now, but I knew what I saw. The nurse was here. The next morning, we left the motel at sunrise, eager to put more distance between us and whatever was following us. I checked Noah as we drove, stroking his soft cheek, making sure he was okay. Then I saw it. A mark, a small dark handprint on his tiny chest. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Ethan's. It was hers. Tears welled up in my eyes. "Ethan, look!" His face paled as he glanced at the mark. What the hell? We didn't speak after that. There was nothing left to say. We needed answers. I thought about going to a priest, a psychic, anyone who could help. But how could I explain this without sounding insane? Then I remembered something. The hospital. The shadow nurse had started there. Maybe she had ended there too. We turned the car around. Back at the hospital, everything looked normal, too normal. Nurses walked the halls. Patients lay in their beds. Life moved on like nothing had happened. But I knew better. We found an older nurse at the front desk, someone who looked like she had worked there for decades. I leaned in, my voice low. "I need to ask you something about a nurse who worked here. A long time ago." She frowned. "Which nurse?" I swallowed hard. "She wears an old uniform, pale skin, dark eyes. I saw her after my baby." The color drained from the nurse's face. She lowered her voice. "You saw her?" I nodded. The nurse hesitated, then sighed. Her name was Margaret Hale. She worked here in the 1950s. Worked? Past tense. "What happened to her?" I asked, my heart racing. The nurse hesitated again. Then in a whisper she said, "She stole babies." My stomach dropped. Ethan grabbed my hand. "What do you mean?" The nurse glanced around, as if making sure no one was listening. "She took them in the night," she said. "Newborns just like yours. She would tell the mothers to rest, to let her care for them, and then they were GG1. A chill crawled up my spine. "What happened to her?" I whispered. The nurse's expression darkened. "They found her. One night, in the nursery, she had taken another baby." She shuddered. "The mother caught her, attacked her. The hospital tried to cover it up, but she died that night." I held Noah tighter. "How?" Ethan asked. The nurse looked at me. "She was strangled," she said, "by the baby's mother." The room seemed to close in around me. I felt sick. This wasn't just a ghost story. This was real. Margaret Hale had taken babies, and now, even in death, she wanted mine. We left the hospital in a hurry, our hearts racing. "We have to stop this," Ethan said. "We can't keep running." I knew he was right. That night we checked into another motel, but this time I was ready. I stayed awake, Noah in my arms, waiting for her. At exactly 3 a.m., the air turned cold, the whispers started, the closet door creaked open, and then she stepped out. Her face was twisted with rage, her black eyes locked onto Noah. "Give him to me," she hissed. "No," I said, standing my ground. "You can't have him." She lunged. The room exploded into chaos, lights flickering, the walls shaking. I screamed, clutching Noah as tightly as I could. Ethan grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "We have to fight her." "But how?" Then I remembered. Margaret had died at the hands of a mother protecting her child. That was her weakness. She had never won. She never would. I turned to her, my voice strong. "You don't belong here," she shrieked, her form flickering. You lost before," I said, "and you'll lose again." The room shook harder. She let out an ear-piercing scream, her body twisting, melting into shadow. Then she was gone. The air cleared. The light steadied. Noah stirred in my arms, safe, warm. It was over. The next morning, we left for good. No more motels, no more running. We went to a new town, a new house. Some were fresh, some were safe. Months passed. No strange whispers, no cold air, no shadow nurse. But one night, as I rocked Noah to sleep, I saw a faint handprint on his crib, smaller than before, fading, almost gone, but still there, a final warning. She wasn't done, not yet, and I knew one day she would try again. Months passed and life slowly returned to normal. Noah was growing, smiling and laughing, just like any other baby. The dark days felt like a distant nightmare, something I could push away if I tried hard enough. But deep down, I knew the truth. She was still watching, still waiting. One night, as I rocked Noah to sleep, a soft breeze drifted through the room. The window was shut. I froze. Then a whisper, so faint I almost didn't hear it. "Not yet." Terror gripped my heart. I turned, expecting to see her, but there was nothing. Just shadows, just silence. The mark on Noah's crib was gone. The air was warm again. And for the first time in a long time, I believed we were finally free. I kissed Noah's forehead, holding him close. Whatever had haunted us, whatever had followed us from the hospital, it was over. She was gone. At least I hope she was, because if she ever came back, I would be ready. I never thought that bringing my baby home would be the beginning of my nightmare. It was supposed to be the happiest time of my life. But something was wrong, something dark, and it was watching me. After 3 long days in the hospital, I was finally home with my newborn daughter, Lily. My husband, Daniel, carried the car seat inside while I held onto the hospital bag. Our house felt strangely quiet, even though nothing had changed. "Finally home," Daniel sighed, setting down the car seat in the living room. I gently lifted Lily and held her close. She was so small, so fragile. Her tiny fingers curled around mine, making my heart melt. But even as I admired her, a strange feeling crept into my chest. It was as if someone was standing right behind me, watching. I turned my head quickly. Nothing. "You okay?" Daniel asked. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired." That night we placed Lily in her crib in our room. I lay in bed, exhausted, but sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt uneasy, like something was in the room with us. The air felt thick, heavy. Then Lily started crying. I sat up immediately and looked over at the crib. She was kicking her little legs, her face red. But what made my blood run cold was the shadow on the wall. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't Daniel's. Someone or something was standing next to her crib. I gasped and reached for the lamp. But as soon as the light flickered on, the shadow was gone. I convinced myself I was imagining things. Lack of sleep, stress, hormones, anything but the idea that something was in our house. But things got worse. The next night, Lily woke up crying again, and as I reached for her, I heard it. A whisper, faint but clear, "She's mine." I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I looked at Daniel, but he was still asleep. I grabbed Lily quickly and held her close. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. "Just my imagination," I whispered to myself, rocking Lily back and forth. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The days passed, and I tried to act normal. I told myself it was just post-pregnancy anxiety, but then I started noticing the marks. One morning, while changing Lily's diaper, I saw tiny bruises on her arms, fingerprints. My stomach twisted in fear. Had I held her too tightly? No, I was always careful. I showed Daniel, but he brushed it off. "Babies bruise easily," he said. "Maybe she bumped into something." But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. One night, while I was half asleep, I heard a soft voice. It was a lullaby, a haunting, eerie tune. I turned my head slowly. There, in the dim light, a figure stood over Lily's crib. A tall, dark shadow. It was rocking her crib gently, whispering a song. My breath caught in my throat. I reached for the lamp, my fingers trembling. The second the light came on, the figure vanished. Lily let out a wail. I rushed to her and scooped her up, my hands shaking. I didn't sleep that night. Desperate for answers, I called my mother. She listened carefully before saying, "I think you should speak to Mrs. Holloway." Mrs. Holloway was our neighbor, an old woman who had lived in the area for over 50 years. I knocked on her door, and when she opened it, her eyes immediately fell on Lily. Her expression darkened. "You need to leave that house," she said without hesitation. I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" She sighed and gestured for me to come in. As we sat at her small wooden table, she began her story. "Years ago, a woman named Eleanor lived in your house. She was desperate for a child, but she could never have one. People said she went mad. She used to sit by the window, whispering lullabies to a doll, pretending it was real. A chill ran down my spine. One night she took her own life in what is now your bedroom." Mrs. Holloway's voice dropped to a whisper. "They say her spirit never left. She's still searching for a baby." I felt sick. I rushed out of her house and ran back home, holding Lily tighter than ever. That night, I refused to sleep. I kept the lights on, sitting by Lily's crib with a baseball bat in hand. At 3 a.m., the room grew ice cold. The lights flickered. Then the whispers came. "She's mine." The crib started shaking violently. Lily let out a terrified cry. I stood up, my body frozen in fear. A dark figure emerged from the shadows, tall and thin, with hollow eyes that burned into mine. Its mouth stretched into a twisted grin. "Give her to me." "No!" I screamed. Daniel woke up with a start. "What the hell?" The figure lunged. I grabbed Lily and ran. Daniel followed, slamming the bedroom door behind us. The house shook. The lights exploded. We didn't stop running until we were outside. The next day, we packed our things and left. We never went back. We found a new home, a small apartment far from that cursed place. For weeks I had nightmares of that shadowy figure, whispering in the dark. But Lily was safe, and that was all that mattered. Even now, sometimes in the dead of night, I swear I hear it. A soft, eerie lullaby. And I pray that she never hears it too. Even after we moved, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching us. I avoided mirrors, afraid I'd see something lurking behind me. Every time I heard a creak in the floor or a whisper in the night, my heart raced. Daniel tried to reassure me. "It's over. We're safe now." I wanted to believe him. I really did. One evening, while folding baby clothes, I noticed something chilling. Lily's onesie, one I had never seen before, was sitting in her drawer. It was old, yellowed with age, and smelled faintly of lavender. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Embroidered on the front was a single name, Eleanor. My blood turned to ice. I grabbed Lily and ran to Daniel, shoving the onesie into his hands. "Where did this come from?" I demanded. His face paled. I don't know. I threw it away that night. but I couldn't shake the feeling that Eleanor had left one last message. Months passed, and the nightmares faded. Lily grew stronger, happier, and slowly the fear loosened its grip on me. One night, as I rocked her to sleep, I whispered, "She's mine, and I'll never let you take her." The room stayed still, no shadows, no whispers, just silence. And for the first time since bringing Lily home, I finally felt safe. But even now, whenever I hear a lullaby, I hold her just a little tighter, because deep down, I know Eleanor is still searching. Exhausted but happy. My baby had arrived just a few hours ago. The pain of childbirth still lingered in my body, but when I thought about my little one, my heart filled with warmth. The nurse entered with a soft smile. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "I'm tired, but I'm okay," I said weakly. "Where is my baby?" She looked at me strangely. "Your baby?" "Yes, my newborn baby, the one I gave birth to tonight," I said, my voice shaking slightly. She hesitated before answering. "Ma'am, you were brought in alone. There was no baby." My heart stopped. "No, that's not possible." I held my baby in my arms. The doctor was here. The nurses were here. The nurse looked concerned. "Let me check your file. Just rest for now." She walked out of the room, leaving me in silence. My mind raced. How could she say there was no baby? I remembered everything clearly. The pain, the screams, the doctor telling me to push, and finally the beautiful cry of my newborn. Something was very wrong. I struggled to sit up, my body weak from labor. I reached for the call button and pressed it frantically. A different nurse arrived. "Please, where is my baby?" I begged. She flipped through my file, frowning. "You were admitted last night for exhaustion. There is no record of a delivery." My breath caught in my throat. "That's not true," I cried. "Please find the doctor who delivered my baby." The nurse hesitated before nodding. "I will check," she said, then left the room. I gripped the hospital bed sheets tightly. Was I losing my mind? Had I imagined it all? No. I could still feel the weight of my baby in my arms, still hear the tiny cries. A sudden noise made me jump. It was soft, almost like a baby crying. My heart pounded. The sound was coming from the hallway. Ignoring the pain, I pulled off the IV and forced myself to stand. My legs trembled, but I had to follow the sound. I opened the door slowly and peeked outside. The hallway was lit, empty except for the long row of hospital rooms. Then I heard it again, the soft, desperate cry of a newborn. I stepped into the hallway, following the sound. It led me toward an old, unused section of the hospital. The walls were cracked, the lights flickering. My breath grew shallow as I pushed forward. The crying stopped suddenly. I reached a door at the end of the hall. A sign above it read, "Maternity Ward, closed for renovation." My hands shook as I pushed the door open. Inside, the air was thick with dust. Old hospital beds lined the walls, their sheets stained and torn. The smell of antiseptic and decay filled my nose. And then, I saw it. A row of old bassinets covered in dust, standing in the center of the room. My heart pounded as I walked toward them. I brushed the dust off one bassinet and gasped. Inside was a small, wrapped bundle, just like a newborn. But when I touched it, the blanket was empty. Then suddenly the crying started again. This time it was louder, surrounding me from all sides. I spun around. The room was empty. "Where are you?" I whispered, tears filling my eyes. "Where is my baby?" A soft giggle echoed behind me. My blood turned cold. I turned around slowly. A woman stood in the shadows, holding something in her arm. "My baby," she whispered. I couldn't see her face clearly, but I could feel her eyes on me. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She stepped closer. The dim light revealed her pale face, sunken eyes, and cracked lips. She was wearing a hospital gown just like mine. "You took my baby," she whispered. "No, I." She stepped closer, her arms tightening around the bundle she held. "You took my baby, so I took yours," she said. Panic rose in my chest. "Where is my baby?" I screamed. She let out a hollow laugh. "Gone, just like mine." Tears blurred my vision. Please give my baby back, I begged. She tilted her head. Will you give me mine? I stared at her, shaking my head. I don't understand. They took my baby. They told me he never existed. They locked me away in this place. I searched for him. I waited, but he never came back. She reached out a bony hand. Give me my baby. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in short gasps. The crying grew louder, more desperate. It was my baby's cry. I turned and ran. The hallway twisted and changed around me. Doors slammed shut, lights flickered. The walls pulsed like they were alive. And then I saw it. A small bassinet at the end of the hall, rocking gently. My baby, I cried, rushing forward. I reached inside, but the blanket was cold, empty. A whisper filled my ears. Too late, I screamed. I woke up in my hospital bed, gasping for air. A nurse rushed in. Are you okay? I looked around. The room was bright. The old hallway, the ghostly woman, it was all gone. My baby, I whispered. Where is my baby? The nurse's face paled. You were brought in alone, she said softly. Tears streamed down my face. I heard a giggle. I turned to the corner of the room. The pale woman stood there, cradling something in her arms. She smiled. Shh, she whispered. The baby is sleeping. And the crying stopped. I felt my body go numb as I stared at the pale woman in the corner of the room. She swayed gently, cradling the invisible baby in her arms, her hollow eyes fixed on mine. No, I whispered. Please, give me back my baby. The woman only smiled, her cracked lips stretching unnaturally. He's mine now. Tears streamed down my face. No, he belongs to me. He's my baby. She tilted her head, just like mine belonged to me, until they took him away. I shook my head violently. I didn't take your baby. The woman stepped closer, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. They told me he never existed. They locked me away. They made me mad. Her voice trembled. And now, they say the same about you. I gasped, my mind spinning. I glanced at the doorway, hoping for a nurse, a doctor, anyone. But the hallway outside was empty. I turned back to the woman, but she was gone. The room felt unbearably silent. Then I heard it. A whisper, a soft giggle, and then a single faint baby's cry. It was coming from the bassinet beside my bed. With shaking hands, I reached for the blanket. I pulled it back and screamed. The bassinet was empty, yet the crying continued, echoing through the hospital walls. The lights flickered, and the room grew cold. And then I understood. No one would believe me. No one would ever find my baby. Because, just like the woman before me, I was trapped in this nightmare. Forever.